Hello, I'm Paul Perrello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. Well, the phrase miracles do happen seems to get lost these days on the hustle and bustle of our everyday lives. But sometimes, if you just look around you, you could see and experience miracles. And such is the case of my next guest, who, two of them, upon arriving at St. Francis de Sales in West Philadelphia more than 30 years ago, realized that there were many miracles happening at the school, and oftentimes in some desperate circumstances. Sisters Constance Toohey and Sister Jeanette Lucy, both IHMs, witnessed these little miracles personally when they were appointed to St. Francis de Sales in West Philadelphia. What they initially experienced was a distressed part of the city. Also joining the sisters on our program is Judy Stavisky. And I want to welcome all three of you to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
They're here to talk about this book that they have written. The book is right here in front of me. It is called Do It Better, How the Kids of St. Francis de Sales Exceeded Everyone's Expectations. I want to go back in time, first of all, Sister Constance. You were named principal of the school.
That's right.
Correct?
Yes.
Sister Jeanette was the eighth grade teacher.
Grade teacher, correct.
Yeah. So you're sent to this part of West Philadelphia.
Yes.
Give me an idea, first of all, Sister Constance, when you got your assignment. You're obedient. You take the assignment, as most religious are. What goes through your mind when you first walked in the doors of St. Francis de Sales?
Well, I did go early in June, before the summertime, to meet with the principal to see what it was about, and she told me everything was fine. All the teachers were coming back, and I didn't have a tour of the school at that time, but I had never been in the city of Philadelphia before. I had been in the suburbs in California and Peru, but I had never been there before. So I was just interested in trying to get a feel for the school, and she told me how many children there were and that the teachers were all there and they were coming back. So I went away for the summer thinking everything was fine.
And then, lo and behold, probably when the school bells rang in September, it was an eye-opening experience.
Yes.
And Sister Constance, you were joined by Sister Jeanette.
Right.
As Sister Jeanette, you were an eighth grade teacher.
Yes, I was.
And boy, talk about getting the plum assignment of eighth grade, where those kids are rammy as heck. What was it like for you when you got the assignment?
Well, I had been in the city for most of my teaching life. And so I was anxious to get started. And this principal didn't arrive, and we needed teachers.
Yeah.
And finally she did arrive, and we began a project that really changed our lives.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a remarkable story, and as I said at the beginning, miracles do happen, and sometimes miracles are right around us and we don't necessarily realize it. You were up against some tremendous odds, not only because you're inner city, but you're perhaps in one of the most distressed parts of Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. You're dealing with a demographic base of kids, students, and families from pretty much all over the area, and then you add in, I guess, the environment. It's not going to school on the main line. It's not going to school in South Philadelphia or the Northeast, where the two of you are currently stationed. But you're really, so some people would say, in a war zone because of where St. Francis de Sales was located.
Yes, it was definitely a war zone around the school and in the neighborhoods where the kids lived.
You could tell about the building, the shape the building was in. She's a building.
It was horrible. The large Victorian homes were in horrible condition all around us, and our school was as well. There was moss growing on the outside of the building because the pipes inside were broken, and the auditorium floor had holes in it. So everything except for the kids was in really bad shape.
Yeah.
But these kids were the value. They were the treasure.
Yeah. I also want to welcome into the program Judy, because you're not a member of the religious order, but you sort of came upon these sisters. You knew they had a story to tell. So you worked with them in what was supposed to be a 5-month project, and it turned into much longer than. So what inspired you, Judy, or what made you decide that, hey, there is something really important to tell here?
I met the sisters about 25 years ago when I was looking for programs in the community that were fortifying the neighborhood. I had, at the time, was working at a managed care plan that, so a health insurance plan for low-income families. And we had a lot of emergency room visits around violence-related injuries. So instead of looking at the back end and lowering the costs, and we thought the only way to have an impact was to actually go on the front end and figure out how could we prevent the violence that was showing up in the emergency rooms that we were paying for. And the sisters had this very promising program, not high tech, but very high touch. And they changed the culture of the school. And they showcased the children who had the courage not to fight. And I remembered that 20 years later when I retired from my full-time job, and I called the sisters and I said, gee, do you have a project I could work on? Because I remember all the things you did. And they said, we're working on a book. And I said, that's a good project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And the program you alluded to is the Peace Program,
Yes, it
which,
is.
which we'll get into in a
Yes.
moment here. But back to the sisters, you walk into this building, it's practically falling down
Yes, it
around
was.
you. Was that just because of neglect of, of no support from families, no support from the parish, no support from, it's easy to point fingers, but how does a building get to such a point?
The parish had been,
It was once a very wealthy Irish parish, and when they had the money, they were very generous with it. I know the pastor told us that some of the families then began moving to the suburbs. They gave $50,000 to St. Dorothy's when that opened, $60,000 to St. Andrews when that opened. These are parishes. And then when they built Cardinal O'Hara High School, the parish gave $500,000, which was a lot of money back in the day. But then as all those families moved out and poorer families moved in, the parish became in debt. So when we got there, they were on the dole from the central office, archdiocesan, financial assistance. So they didn't get, and it wasn't that people didn't pay, they paid what they could. And there just wasn't the money in the collection anymore to do things. So this once wealthy Irish Catholic parish was now a poor parish filled with many poor people, African American and immigrants from the Vietnam War, many Vietnamese and Cambodians and Chinese and everybody.
You really saw that neighborhood change a number of times because not only did you step into what would be described as a poor parish or a distressed part of Philadelphia, but and you were both there for 30 years. I don't want to give away their ages, but they were there for quite some time. So not only did you deal with poverty of just people that lived there, but then there was this influx of immigrants that were coming into that part of the city, and many of them made their way to the school.
They did. They did. And we welcomed them. And our children learned to welcome them, no matter what countries they came from. We celebrated something new, something was happening. And we learned together about all of the different cultures and the practices and the celebrations of those cultures. And it became just something that Sister Constance would announce. Tomorrow we're getting some children from Liberia. And everybody would get excited because we helped create this environment of acceptance and appreciation.
And you also bought, they also found flags from every country that the children were from. Not as easy in those days as it is now to Google something. And so imagine how proud a child would be when they come into a new school and there's a flag from their country. And there are many flags that welcome the children in the front hall.
Yes, and I can remember I would announce it when I said, boys and girls, tomorrow we're getting a little girl, a third grade girl from Chile. This is the first child from Chile. And so then everybody claps, they're all happy. And I went out in the hall, and a little third grade African-American girl was coming down the hall. She said, don't you worry, Sister Constance, we'll take good care of her.
Oh, that's great.
They did.
So we knew we had won when we got to that point.
You recount some great stories in this book. And as I told the sisters before time, I had a hard time keeping track of the book because everybody at work would see it and they would want to read it. And I was like, no, I need the book back because I got to get ready for this interview. But when do you reach that realization, sisters, that look, there's just so much we could do with the physical plant, but there's something else going on here? When do you realize that if we invest in our children, if we show them the love and the respect that they deserve, that's going to go a long way to reaching these kids, and then maybe that spills out into their families and into the community. When do you realize that?
Well,
One of the things I would say is the day that the 5th grade teacher took his class in town. And you get on the trolley at the corner, but then at 43rd Street, the trolley goes underground, and you're underground for most of the time. And they came up at Logan Circle. He was taking them to the library. When they came up out of the subway into this Logan Circle with the fountain and the beautiful flowers and everything, this Vietnamese boy said, "Mr. Clay, I knew we came to America for freedom. I didn't know that it was all so beautiful."
Wow, yeah.
And I thought, they came at night and were put in these abandoned apartment buildings and everything, and that's all they saw was the hood. And so there had to be some ways to give them experiences outside the hood. And we began working on that. And that's when I appointed her the contest coordinator, because I knew whatever I gave her to do, she'd really work at it,
Yeah.
and she did.
Yeah.
And so she began working with them and entering them. Anytime anything came in for a contest, I gave it to her, no matter what grade it was, and she would take them before school, after school, whenever, and work with them. And they began winning many contests. And the first ones they won, we won first, second, and third place in an art contest, and the pastor said, "Did anybody else join?" We said, "Yes, there were other stores." But that got them out of the neighborhood and to meet children from other schools and things like that, and to learn there was another part of Philadelphia.
but it also gave them a chance to use their own talents, things they didn't realize they had.
Yeah.
For example, one young fella, he won first place in the United States for the best research paper.
Right.
And another one won first place in the city, the state, and third in the nation for a project about his escape from Cambodia. But he had never had a pen or pencil in his hand. He was in Pol Pot's concentration camps, and they had not gone to school. So when he realized what he could do to express himself, and many of them did that, they put on paper or they drew things that got these feelings out of themselves. And then the other kids started to say, well, maybe I can do that too.
Sure.
So it happened kind of, I guess it was like a miracle. People said it was magic. Well, it wasn't exactly magic.
But I
But
think you had to
think-
recognize that each of the children has something to offer.
They
You just
did.
had to find out a way for them to access what they had.
That's
to
right, and
offer,
we
what
had to
they
have
can
as many
contribute.
different vehicles for this
Yeah.
as possible.
Yes, that one boy that won this third place in the nation, he had never been in school or anything, never had any pencil or pen. He was a gifted artist, and Sister discovered that when she told him to draw something. And he said, well, I used to see some people in the refugee camp did some art. And he did this beautiful drawing of Angkor Wat. And it was all done with microdot pen in pointillism. And an artist came in and saw it, said, he's an expert in pointillism. She said, why did you choose pointillism? He didn't know what she was talking
Right.
about. Well, why did you do all those dots? He said, I thought it would look softer that way. So you just unnoticed talents just came out when you
Gave them opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's a-
love them,
yes.
and love them.
It's amazing. The book also features many of the firsthand accounts of some of the students that went through the school. First of all, I have to remark that you were there for 30 years.
Yes.
Right.
So obviously something was working. I suspect that if the parish or the diocese felt that things weren't working there, they would have sold off the property, closed it up, and would have just abandoned that part of town. It's a matter of economics. But obviously something was working there. Obviously these students, and there are hundreds of them that went through the school over these, if thousands, Judy, you were responsible in part to reaching out to some of these students to get their stories. And most of them, if not all of them, were very amenable to telling their story.
I think one of the things that struck me was how much they attributed this initial experience at this little scrappy Catholic school
Yeah.
in West Philly to their success, to a one. people would talk about how much joy they had in meeting people from different cultures, and many of them married. There are many marriages and many friendship networks that continue to this day. Every single person I talked to said, oh yes, I'm still in touch with this one and that one. And again, it was before, a lot of them were connecting before Facebook.
Yeah.
And now they have Facebook connections. And each of them attributed this unconditional love that they felt at the school. They felt welcomed. There were very few fights, and there were opportunities for children to excel. And what could be better than that?
Absolutely. I want to talk about the Peace Program because that was a vital part of your work there. You recount in the book, oftentimes students would come in to school first thing in the morning, having witnessed some horrific crimes, whether at home or just going to the corner store and seeing the clerk behind the counter being shot, and these kids would come to school shaking like a leaf, and they would have to, you would have to embrace them and try to figure out what did they just experience and try to make things better for them. All of this then brings about, I guess, the Peace Program for the school. So could we talk a little bit about that program?
Well, we ended up, in the early years, we were speaking at funerals of parents, uncles, cousins, and graduates in a few cases. And we thought we can't just be reactive to this violence. And Judy's organization discovered that our zip code had the second highest homicide rate in the city. Wow. And so we decided to become proactive, and it began in Sister Constance's little tiny office.
Right. There were stages to it. At first, we would let them come in and talk about it, but we decided we tried to be positive about everything.
Sure.
And so we decided, I think the Peace Wall might have been first. Yes, that we were going to start rewarding children for being peacemakers. Not because in the schoolyard, if a fight starts, everybody gets around in a crowd to cheer them on and root and everything. And we started the new kind of a hero is the one with the courage not to fight. To do a handshake instead of a fist. And so we began nominating students for good. We didn't have a demerit program.
Now let me just say, Paul, that's philosophically different. If you have a demerit program, what are you looking for?
Bad things.
The bad things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
to punish them.
In looking for good things, there's something that happens that changes the climate in the school. It does.
And you had the pictures. They had the photographs of the children who had the courage not to fight.
On this Peace Wall.
They went on the Peace Wall.
Fabulous.
Every week we would read, the nominations would come in from the teachers. They were read over the PA, and now come down to the office and get your picture taken, and their picture was put up on the wall. So that soon we had a whole wall of peacemakers. And tell them some teachers didn't.
Yes, teachers oftentimes were a problem. Because suppose somebody said, Paul did something really good today, and Paul's teacher says, but Paul's bad. But today Paul did something that was really good. Well, tomorrow Paul's probably going to do something bad. So we had to work with the teachers and their mindset and say, for Paul's sake, he needs to get his picture there and know that maybe it can happen again tomorrow. So that was important in this process.
It's a remarkable program. Is it a program that has been embraced by other schools, or other people have sat up and take notice and said, hey, look how it's working at St. Francis de Sales. Maybe we should incorporate it here.
An important part of this was this peace room where we would get these kids to come and sit and talk it out. Most often they did not want any of us being in there. And it was hard for them to sit there and try to, we always had a lot of tissues around. And they just realized sometimes that they were set up by somebody else. He said, she said, and then they could go and get that person and bring them to the peace table.
And they both faced them.
They did. And that made a difference. And one time, an administrator from the school district of Philadelphia came and he wanted to know about it. And he said, sisters, could you leave? And I'd like to talk to some of the students about it. So certainly it's their program.
Sure.
So Sister Constance announced on the PA, and she said, anybody who used the peace room this year, would you please come to the peace room? oh, these whole herds of kids were coming down the hall.
Yeah.
We never kept records. And
Uh-huh.
he talked to them, and they told him that it's not corny. He tried to get them to say it's corny.
Yeah.
See, he asked, he talked to them for a little bit, and then
Yeah.
he said, would you leave? And then he came
Yes.
to me afterwards, and he said, I wanted you to go, and once you left, I said, you said all those nice things in front of the nuns, but tell me the truth.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
don't you think this is a corny program? He said they were insulted.
Really?
They said, sir, we have to be role models for the little children in this school. This is serious business.
Yeah.
They're all looking up to us. If we can't be the peacemakers, how are they going to learn?
Sure.
So he came to us afterwards, and he said, I thought I was going to get them to be say, oh yeah, we just, you have to be nice to the nuns and all. But he said they were insulted.
Wow.
But we
That
won a
he-
number of national awards for it, and the Apothecary Award from the Philadelphia Bar Foundation, and several state awards. And then after Columbine, we began getting inquiries about it. Can you send us your curriculum? We said, we don't have a curriculum.
It's
Yeah.
a way of life
Yeah.
within the school.
Yes.
30 years comes and goes. You then, your next assignment comes around.
Yes, it does.
And you're told you have to leave St. Francis de
That's
Sales
right.
and you have to go to a parish in Northeast
That's
Philadelphia.
right, that's right.
Is it unusual, first of all, for both the 8th grade teacher and the principal, for two sisters to go from assignment A to assignment B together?
Yes. And something that's not in the book that really deserves being said is we wrote this about what it was like when we first got there. But after maybe 10 years, we began to find people that were interested in what we were doing and began to support us. So we
Right.
got a lot of support then from the main line. So we got off the dole from downtown.
Okay.
And
okay.
Totally.
we
Yeah.
had many angels that came, and they're not in here. This is what it was like in the beginning. So that the improvements were made in the buildings, and more programs came in. All of those things happened later, but we certainly had many wonderful people who supported us during that time.
Yeah. So I guess it had to be bittersweet that, sister, because you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this part of West Philadelphia that could have just become another war zone, another X on a map that people had just written off. But you and Sister Constance work at this. You get everybody to turn around and realize that, hey, this is so important what we're doing here. Now you go up to the Northeast. So it's sort of bittersweet, but you've left your mark on this part of West Philadelphia.
But our community asked us then, we had begun to do development at St. Francis de Sales, and they said that this school in the Northeast doesn't have a development program, and would we be willing to go there? And we said yes.
Yeah.
That's what religious do.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And it was the beginning of a changing neighborhood, just beginning. And so, we think we have something we can contribute there, but you fall in love with children.
Sure.
Children
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
They are adorable.
They really are.
So,
Yeah. Let me ask about the title of the book, Do It Better. How did you come upon that title?
okay, so what happened is when we began winning all of these prizes, because as she entered them in the contest, they won poetry and art and essay and all kinds of things, and speech tournaments. It would be DeSales wins again. It was in the papers and everything. And when I would go to principals' meetings, they'd say, "Who's your art teacher?" And because you win all these art prizes, I said, "We don't have one." So I thought, I don't think she knows anything about art. So I went back to her and I said, "How do you get them to do so well?" And so she said, "Well, I tell them, art it, and when they come up with it, if I think it's not good enough, I say, do it better." I give it back to them and I say, "Do it better." And then they come back, whether it's art or poetry or whatever, and they come back with it and it's better.
Yeah.
So
And it wasn't that I was putting them down. It was that I just felt
Expected
there
more.
could be more.
Right.
And so they did it better.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
isn't that what teaching and education's about?
Sure.
Bringing the best and doing it better.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the students remembered, that you gently pushed them.
She pushed them,
and had them excel.
And as they began to win, then they became believers in themselves.
Yes.
Sure.
You see,
That's-
that change, you asked earlier about the change, that did happen.
Yeah.
They became believers, and that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Judy, where could people pick up a copy of the book? It's a book that I think whether you have a fleeting interest in education or you have a passion for education and a passion for helping children, regardless of where you live and what you do, where can they get a copy of the book?
3 different places. The sisters have a website called The Welcome School,
Okay.
one word, .com, and Barnes & Noble and Amazon are both selling the book.
Okay. All right. We only have about we could go on for hours here
Yes.
because I so much believe in your mission here. How has this whole experience changed the 2 of you sisters?
Writing the book,
Yeah.
it was an emotional experience. It was to recall all of those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then to have Judy get in touch with them and to see what has happened to them. We never had the possibility even or the time to follow them, and they make us so proud.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
It's just,
Yeah.
So you didn't tell them about your treasure box?
I have a treasure box that they would write and draw pictures of when they escaped from their countries. And I have that today. It's a treasure of primary sources.
Wow.
And it's invaluable.
Sure.
I wish everybody in the United States could pick through my box and read those wonderful stories of resistance and courage.
Yeah. Truly amazing, especially given the times that we live in today
Yes,
and not
absolutely.
really understanding what it's like for a child, just a child to
Yes.
come into the country, either legally or illegally, but
Yes.
not coming here with their family
That's right.
and facing a whole new set of circumstances.
Yes.
The name of the book, again, is Do It Better, How the Kids of St. Francis de Sales Exceeded Everyone's Expectations. As I said, if you really want a good read, it's an easy read. You're going to love this book. There are some great pictures in here, some great stories that the students of St. Francis recounted for Judy, and you will not be disappointed. This is a book that you definitely want to pick up. I want to thank all 3 of you for being
Thank
with
you.
us here on the program.
Thank you.
An enjoyable experience, and I wish you all well,
Thank you.
especially in your
Thank
new
you.
assignments up in the
Yes.
Northeast.
Thank you.
And continued success, best of health, and
Thank you.
so much for your time.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you,
All right,
Paul.
thank you.
God bless.
Until the
God
next
bless you.
time, thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of The Philly Factor. My name is Paul Perrello. We'll see you next time.